Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Today is our first tri-branded webinar session with Huntress Recruitment, who I've worked with Stephanie over the years before, and obviously Bracious, and Colin from the employment law team. We just wanted to go over a little bit about recruitment, making sure we get the hiring right, HR, make sure we're setting people up for success, and also covering some important employment law aspects as well. I am using paper, I won't lie. This isn't supposed to be mind-blowing. I appreciate we have professionals on the line today that understand how this all works, but sometimes it's just really nice to know that what you're doing is the right thing to be doing and best practice. But I do hope for everybody there might be an oh moment. So we shall see. So just a little introduction to who we are. So I'll start with myself. I'm Charlotte Cookbourne. I'm one of the consultants who works for Kent HR. We have a wealth of experience between us on multiple sectors, helping various sizes of business, both with their own HR and without their own HR. We can essentially assist with anything to do with the employee life cycle. It's just as and when you need us, or you can have us on a more retained basis where we can help you more consistently long term. I'll let Stephanie just introduce herself briefly.
Thank you, Charlotte, and once again, thanks everybody for joining on today. I'm Stephanie. I work for Huntress and have done for 19 years. For those people that don't know Huntress, we are a national recruitment agency specialising in all sort of functions of business support and finance across both the sort of temporary and permanent sectors of the business. I'd like to reiterate I'm pleased to be working with Kent HR today, and as Charlotte mentioned, I've worked with her both personally and professionally. Highly recommended. And as we go sort of through the session, you know, you may be facing any sort of like recruitment challenges. You can ask any questions at the end. Struggling to attract the right talent, which I think everybody knows is quite challenging at the moment. Or if you just generally want an insight into what's happening in the market at the moment. Although I work in Kent, I actually do recruit nationally from for a number of my clients from Perth to Portsmouth. Actually, it happens to be Perth and Portsmouth, but and happy to sort of share any insights and experiences that you might want to that you might be facing at the moment.
Thank you. And last but not least, Colin from Bracious.
Yeah, I'm Colin Smith. I'm one of the partners at Bracious. I'm an employment lawyer for those of you that haven't come across me on any of our other previous webinars. Right, and I'm doing the next bit. So I got hired in today to sort of go, this is why getting recruitment is right from a scary legal perspective.
That's it.
In simplicity, the law that we're dealing with, Section 39(1) of the Equality Act 2010, if you ever get really bored, go and read it. That's where the Equality Act says the discrimination rules, direct discrimination, indirect, failure to make reasonable adjustments, disability, race, sex, all the stuff that makes up discrimination or harassment. How does that all apply to work? Well, it applies under Section 39, and the first part of Section 39 makes it very clear that all of those discrimination rules apply in the arrangements you make for deciding whom to offer employment, in other words, the recruitment process, the terms on which you offer employment, in other words, the recruitment process, or by not choosing to offer someone employment, the recruitment process. So those are the actual rules that bring discrimination law into applicants for jobs, not just people once you've hired them for obvious reasons, but those are the actual provisions that make that the case. So we have primarily, when we're dealing with recruitment issues and onboarding issues, primarily equality law, also some contract law, okay? And those discrimination issues apply from the point of advertising a role. For example, you can discriminate directly in the way you phrase an advert by making it, obviously, for example, in the olden days, no Irish, no blacks. We don't see that hopefully very often anymore, but we do sometimes see some indirect discriminatory wording, experience necessary. It's not necessarily illegal, but it starts to raise questions about age discrimination. It may start to raise questions about potential sex discrimination, depending on the experience and the history and all these other facts. So you have to be careful about that. Shortlisting can be done on obviously a discriminatory basis. It can be done indirectly discriminatory by applying criteria that could disadvantage particular groups that you can't justify. And obviously we're seeing that done by AI. And the question we were discussing before we started today's webinar is, if you're getting AI to do your shortlisting and someone comes along and says, I think you've done it in a discriminatory manner, how are you going to prove otherwise? Because you don't know how it works. It's a quagmire of an area. It's going to develop over the next few years. Nobody quite knows how at the moment. Interview and assessment is obviously the entertaining part of the recruitment process from an employment lawyer's point of view, because people still ask stupid questions. People still make stupid comments. You can harass somebody in a job interview. It has happened many times. You can obviously discriminate against somebody directly in a job interview by what you say. But more importantly, you can indirectly discriminate by asking questions about things like, are you planning to have children? Nobody does that anymore. Nobody's that stupid. Yeah, they still do. Okay. At your age, are you sure this is the right job for you? Still happens. Okay. So these are still, now they're not necessarily of themselves illegal, but they rather indicate that the motivation underlying any decisions that are then made might be for the wrong reasons. Okay. We then get into job offers. Obviously, who you offer the job to or not can be an act of discrimination, but the way in which you offer a job is also quite important. If you get bored, there is a case called Kankalapali versus Loesch Engineering from this year that looked at the mess that HR people can get themselves into in how they offer a job and whether or not they've offered a binding contract, what's called a condition precedent, which stops a contract forming, versus a condition subsequent, which is a condition in the contract once it's formed. Okay. And what it said is, don't merge them together in an offer letter, because the danger is you make them all conditions subsequent, which means if you then rely on them, you are terminating a contract that is formed. You are not stopping it ever forming. So if it is a condition of there ever being a contract that they pass a reference check, you need to be very clear that that's a condition precedent, no contract forms unless they tick that box. Obviously, you then need to make sure you've ticked that box before they started, otherwise you've undermined it, for example. Yeah. Same with right to work checks, references, all these conditions precedent need to be clear and separate from something such as, in that case, a probationary period, which is by its very nature a condition subsequent, not a condition precedent. But because they've merged them all together, the court said, well, we have to be consistent. They're all conditions precedent. There is a contract, you owe him his notice pay. So be careful. It is a salient lesson in being cautious about how you design and write offer letters. Contract terms, obviously, again, be clear, be precise, be certain, but also think about discrimination in your contract terms, mainly the issue of equal pay and what you're actually offering people, what you're paying them, what impact that will have on your existing structure. Will it create equal pay issues once they join? And then induction probation, the only point I'm going to say on that quickly is new rules are coming under the Employment Rights Act 2025. Those new rules from the 1st of January will say that you get unfair dismissal protection at 6 months. Not 6 months from the 1st of January, 6 months from whatever their start date is. Okay, and that makes the normal historic 6 month probationary period somewhat pointless. But Charlotte, I think, is going to come on and talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
So that was my sort of crash course in where equality law and contract law kicks in across the life cycle of the recruitment and onboarding process.
Thank you. I'm going to, sorry, apologies for looking at my watch, but I do want to keep you all on time and not crash your mornings. For those who like some statistics, I have got some here. They are mildly alarming when you think about if you're making several hires over the period of a year, the cost that's incurred. I think the most interesting one is that 1.3 to 1.5 times salary in terms of taking on new employees. And that's just because obviously they need to find their feet and become, you know, profitable and usable and up to speed. But it's not just about the financial cost, the disruption and the time and effort and energy that's needed. I say it takes a village to raise a child, but I think it also takes a whole team to induct a new employee. So you need to think about that. And I will talk again in a minute about the reputational cost about somebody who's joined the business and then left within those sort of first 3 to 6 months, and how they're going to feel about that experience and take that out into the world with them, with the delights of social media that we have today. So I am big on this. I do a lot of training with managers about recruitment, and I cannot say this strongly enough. This is an incredibly important branding exercise. You are going out there into the marketplace, reaching all sorts of people that you would never normally be reaching, and making an impression on them. So it's really important to get this right, because even if you don't want those people right now, if they've had a wonderful experience with you, or even a nice experience with you going through the recruitment process, the likelihood is when they come back, or they might want to come back when another job's available, and they'll come back to you with more experience, more skills and more knowledge. And at that point you might want them. But like I say, with social media these days, it's so easy to get a reputation for having a poor recruitment process. I don't know if anyone's seen some of the horror stories on Glassdoor. If you haven't, please go and have a look, but be afraid. So yeah, it's really important. And that means, I mean, my kids talk about ghosting now, but you hear this in terms of recruitment. So you send your CV in, nothing. You are asked for an interview, you go to an interview, nothing. It's really important, but I totally appreciate it takes a lot of time, but I cannot impress upon you how important it is to make sure that that experience, even for the people that aren't successful, is pleasant and feels good and resonates your brand values. Certain things that can help are recruitment packs. I don't know if anyone uses these. I've drafted lots of these for various companies, and that just tells the candidate a little bit more about what to expect, what kind of questions they're going to be asked, not specific questions, but I'll come on to that in a minute, but more about how long the process takes, how many people they're going to meet. And it, you know, it doesn't have to be specific, but it can give them broad strokes and a little bit more information about the company, because they've got to have enough information to be able to make the right decision. It also sets the tone for you as a business. Helping candidates understand your USP. So we talk a lot in businesses about how, you know, well, we're different to our competitors because we do this. And candidates, especially the younger generations that are coming into the marketplace now, are all about how does that business resonate with me and my values? Does it give me the work-life balance that I'm looking for? So helping them understand what those are before or as part of the recruitment process can be really crucial to helping them make the right decisions, because you don't want them to join and then go, oh, I didn't realise you stood for that. So I've also worked with businesses to create culture packs for anyone that uses those. And they are about those intangibles that make you special and unique. They're about your origin story. They're about your values and why they resonate with you. They're about, you know, how you dress to go to work. They're about how much downtime you give them, you know, how much voluntary days to go and do stuff, your ESG principles. So they're a really nice touch point to help them understand a little bit more about who you are, in the hope that they do resonate with you, or if they don't, then they make the decision it's maybe not for them. Everything to terms with recruitment, probationary, onboarding, I always say starts with the job description. You absolutely have to get that right, because that forms the framework that you're going to use throughout this entire process, and then go on to use to evaluate them in that all-important probationary period. As Colin said, you can no longer rely on 6 months. When I'm talking to clients now, we're talking about 4 tops. So you probably want to have that 3-month with the wiggle room for a month's extension. So you need to be setting clear criteria based on the job description that you've drafted for the recruitment process to set those key areas that you need to at least be able to see development in, to be able to make a mindful decision at that point. Because it's really early on. People don't settle into jobs till probably around 6 months. So you've got to have something to hang your hat on to avoid all those discrimination, and your job description is it. So have a good old think about that and make sure it's right. I talk a lot about how, where and when, because I do a lot of training around diversity and increasing diversity in your recruitment. So these things are really important. How do you want to recruit? You know, who do you want to use? What have you got time for is always the crucial part. If you have your own in-house recruitment, fabulous. Off they go. If it's a more senior hire, or you're specifically looking for very small talent pools in the marketplace, you might want to think about using an agency like Huntress or a headhunter in order to try and find those people and pluck them out of the ether. Or is it just something that, you know, low level or graduate intake or apprenticeships that you can build a relationship with a school or university in order to find those people? So have a little think about how you're going to do it. Then the big thing is about where, you know, where are you going to advertise? Who are you going to collaborate with? Where are you going to find the people that you want to fill those big holes? I've worked in the past with charitable organisations who work with minority groups, and have worked with them because they essentially run the recruitment process for you, and they provide you with excellent candidates that you can put alongside anyone else you've found, and that way you're increasing the diversity around your recruitment. But have a good old think about, you know, where you're going to find them. And then when can be quite key for various industries. So obviously school leavers and apprentices, that's going to be a certain time that you start your recruitment process. Graduates, they have sort of 2 points, don't they? Come the end of summer and again at Christmas for the ones that maybe didn't make it that way looking around. Financial, legal services, they're often waiting for the bonus, so you need to find out when that is, and then there's a bit of a cull. Education, likewise, it's normally around the sort of last term before you start the new school year. And obviously retail and hospitality, it's always best to get your recruitment in before those busy periods and not wait until it's too late. So yes, very important to think about your situational perspective when you're recruiting. Language, super important. Colin's already touched on that already, but not just the language, it's how you present what you're looking for. So I love this statistic that women won't apply for a job role if they don't believe they can do 100% of what's on the advert in terms of the skills that are required. Whereas men, on the other hand, sorry Colin, they only need 60% to feel confident to apply.
Probably less, we just probably only admit to 60%.
Probably. So you have to think very carefully, not just about the language that you use, but how you phrase what it is you want. The best way I suggest to people that they do this is you have essential versus desirable. So you have the things that you absolutely cannot live without. So, you know, has to be able to use Microsoft packages. But then you have the things that would be nice, like Python coding experience, for example. It's a nice to have, not necessarily a key requirement for the job. And that way you can help eliminate some of those things. Right, sorry, Colin's keeping me on time. Right. So when we're talking about the process itself, you've obviously got clear roles, briefs, and success profiles. You've got to help them understand what it is success looks like. 9 times out of 10, when I've done exit interviews with people leaving jobs really early on, they said it wasn't the job that I thought I was applying for. So you have to be very careful, and you have to give them that key information about what 6, 12, 18 months, what success is going to look like for them in their role, what they're going to be doing, how it's going to progress in that way. And that, again, will help you form your onboarding. Structured interview frameworks. This is where we're going to come back to the job description again, and we're going to create a question matrix for your interviews based on that framework. And you're going to consistently ask every candidate that you meet the same questions. I used to do some lovely graduate recruitment with a finance institution in London, and the managing director used to do the graduate recruitment with me. And if he decided, you know, a few questions in, he wasn't keen on that candidate, he would kick me under the table repeatedly until we had to have a conversation where I said, you can kick me as much as you like. We're going to ask every question to every candidate, because that's how you're going to avoid these discriminatory claims, and also be able to prove that you are fair and consistent in your process. We talk about behaviour-based questioning. Everybody, I feel, knows about this, so I won't reiterate it. There are lots of frameworks out there like STAR that you can look up that, you know, sort of give you an idea as to how you do it. Certainly in recruitment packs I've sent out, I've also talked about the frameworks that we'll be using in the interview process so that candidates can actually get their head around that a little bit. And talking about getting your head around that a little bit, reasonable adjustments is a lot of people I see more and more now doing it and putting it on the job adverts and making sure that when they're booking the interviews in that they're asking about reasonable adjustments. But these days we need to be mindful that goes beyond physical disability. You know, we're into the neurodiversity world, and we have to start thinking outside the box about how we can support those through a recruitment process. For example, someone who has ADHD can't necessarily think in the moment in an interview, and so therefore a reasonable adjustment for them would be to provide them with questions in advance. Then you're not giving them a disadvantage, an advantage over the others, because you know the skills and knowledge will or won't be there. And I think we're getting quite good at just, you know, keeping an eye on what's AI generated and what has actually come from a human being. But for them, it will allow them to actually showcase them true selves in an interview process. For those suffering with autism, a great big panel interview would probably be utterly terrifying and make them feel genuinely uncomfortable. So maybe think a little bit outside the box and think about what extra provisions we can make for disabilities that aren't necessarily visible.
But most of the recent case law where it's gone wrong for employers that we've seen in the recruitment sphere has been in failing to make adjustments to the recruitment or the assessment processes, particularly for people with neurodivergent conditions, who've said, I couldn't fill your form in, I didn't understand your online application system, I couldn't follow that, and I told you, and you went, that's the system, tough luck, and didn't do enough to give me alternative options.
Yeah, you need to be explicit that you will make reasonable adjustments, and then if they request one, you need to make sure you follow that through. But yes, I would have it everywhere, on the job advert, on the website where it's advertised. Also, whoever's calling up to arrange the interview, ask them again. If they don't disclose it to you, then you've done the best you can, as long as you can demonstrate that. But yes, it should be out there. Using the right tools. Again, this touches a little bit on that. It's about making sure that if you're using tests and things like psychometric tests and things like AI, that you make sure that these aren't the be all and end all, and they're also appropriate and proportionate to the job that you're recruiting the individual for. So you wouldn't get them to do a filing exercise if they're going to stack shelves in the warehouse. You just need to make sure that it's relevant to the job, and that it only forms part of the decision-making process and isn't the deciding factor. That should be around your structured interview framework.
Somebody's asked, if you are sending the questions to one person because of a disability, would you then send them to everybody else? The legal answer is disability reasonable adjustment law requires you in some cases to treat a disabled person more favourably, not equally. It's a little odd, but equal treatment in disability law means sometimes more favourable treatment.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily have to send them all to everybody else in advance, but nor would I think you'd be criticised if you chose to do so.
Some people do now, just as a matter of form, everyone gets them in advance. So that's your choice. Why a strong start matters. Some more statistics. I know there'll be people on here that love statistics. I love statistics, to be fair. So yes, but I think the one that really frightens me is that 41% of UK employers report new hires leaving within 12 weeks, and that's from the CIPD. I mean, I can only think, what on earth is going wrong there, that you're losing people within the first 3 months? And if you think, if you've paid a recruitment fee, or even if you've paid someone in-house to work on that recruitment, you know, look at all that money you've lost. And as I say, from my experience, if you're losing them early, it's because the job wasn't what they thought it was going to be. They didn't receive the right training or support when they arrived. They didn't really know what was expected of them. So this is about getting that bit right, because that is a lot, isn't it? It's terrifying. Right. So how are we going to set them up for success so we don't lose them after 12 weeks? Clear expectations from day one. I put this including about how you like to communicate, be managed, because when I do a lot of training with managers, I talk about setting these expectations from the day they arrive. Everybody likes to communicate in different ways. Everybody likes to get feedback in different ways. Managers and individuals like to be managed and work in different ways. So there's no point just waiting to see how that falls out and then getting a bit cross with it and having to realign it. You know, day one conversation should be about, how do you like to be managed? This is how I like to manage my team. These are the touch points that we have. These are the regular touch points. These are the one-to-one touch points. These are the structured touch points. What to do if you've got a problem? Do you want them to save it all up and then speak to you later? Or do you want them to just come to you as and when? So setting those clear expectations from day one is great. Also, you're going to look at that framework and think about what it is you want to be seeing from them, and tell them what it is you want to be seeing from them. I always say that, like, they don't know what they don't know at this stage. They're kind of a bit lost in the dark. It's you to tell them what it is you expect them to be picking up. As I say, it takes a village and it takes a whole team. So you need to make sure that everyone's involved. I don't know if anyone uses the buddy system, but part of the team could be helping them and supporting them with those. Where's the coffee machine? Where do I the best place to go out for lunch? You know, those sort of things that help them fit in more culturally. But, you know, everyone should be getting involved. As I talk a bit later, you need your IT guys on board to get them set up and make sure that they've got all the equipment you need. You need them to be going around and meeting people and making sure that there's availability for them to do that, so they can start to get a feel for the other departments within the business and spending time with them. A structured induction plan is always good. I've always worked with spreadsheets in the past. I'm sure there's more wizard ways to do it these days. But for both onboarding and offboarding checklists, to make sure that you know exactly what it is they're supposed to be doing, that everyone's done the bits they're supposed to be doing, that whole team are working together to get them onboarded. And also looking what success looks like. So, you know, week 1, this is your training plan. Week 2, this is your training plan. I have a very good friend of mine who works for a Golden Circle law firm, and she does the first 100 days and maps out what success looks like within those first 100 days, which I think is brilliant. Access to training, super important. As I said, when we're losing them early, it's because they haven't been given the training they need to even get started in doing their job. So if they don't know how to do a core piece of their role because they haven't had the training within their first couple of weeks, then, you know, they're just going to be sat there twiddling their thumbs, not knowing what's going on. So it's about, again, coordinating that structured plan and making sure that this stuff's all lined up. As I mentioned earlier, you don't have long anymore. So as Colin says, come January, everyone who joined you from July this year will fall under the new 6 months unfair, and likewise anyone retrospectively up to 2 years before January. So they're now in here. So anyone you recruit from July, you need to be looking at, say, 4-month maximum probationary period to make sure that you've assessed them correctly before, so that you can make a decision that is still outside of the unfair. That doesn't prevent you, obviously, from any discriminatory claims. It has to be clean in that respect, but certainly in terms of following a full process, as long as you've got it under the 6 months, it's easier. Regular check-ins. There should be regular structured check-ins. Obviously, in a probationary period, you would probably have set formal ones, I hope, with the manager and various people throughout that period. But I would say that, as you don't know what you don't know in those first few days, you should have more time with your manager, weekly, fortnightly, at least in those first couple of months. So make sure that those are booked in the diary and make sure that they're done. How many times do those check-ins get pushed? Because it's like, oh, I talk to you every day. And meaningful real-time feedback. This is different from a check-in. This is like, thank you very much. I saw that. I thought that was really good work. Or I think you're fitting in really well. Or I saw that, and we just do it a slightly different way. Can I just talk to you about how that works now that I've had a chance to have a look at it? So this is real-time feedback that you're giving them. And, you know, as I just demonstrated, it shouldn't be all about developmental. It should be about those plus points. You know, you're nervous, you started a new job, it's a new team, you're getting to know the staff. It's really nice for someone to say, do you know what, you're doing really well. You know, you're brilliant, you're picking it up, don't worry, it's not a silly question, but, you know, you're doing brilliantly. So don't forget that. Right, I'm rocking and rolling.
That's all right. The only thing I would add is the one other failure we tend to see is they don't tell you in the recruitment process. 3 days in, they go, I need a reasonable adjustment made because I've got this medical issue, whether that's physical, mental, I need a chair, I need an adaptation, I need something else. Obviously, that often gets not done. And then at the moment, historically, we get to the end of 6 months and we go, you're rubbish, you're not doing a very good job. And we go, because I've asked for these adjustments and nothing's been done about them. And then we're in a bit of a mess. Now, that point's going to come sooner at 4, 4.5, 5 months at the latest. So again, that's the only other area we see go wrong when people join. It's a little frustrating when they turn up and go, you didn't mention this at any point previously, but I've got all these medical issues and I need all these adjustments. Unfortunately, it doesn't change your obligation to look at them, and if they're reasonable, make them.
Yeah, you'd hope with all the communication, though, that would come out.
You hope it does.
You'd hope.
It doesn't always.
We hope.
Yeah.
Okay, just quickly, practical tips. So align your stakeholders before hiring. Make sure that they're all on board with what you're doing, exactly who you're looking for. The amount of times I've heard, well, I thought we were looking for an admin assistant, not a receptionist. So make sure everyone's on board and ready for the joining and what's going to happen. Challenge assumptions about ideal candidates. People talk about fit, but you need to be able to define what that looks like. And what is an ideal candidate? Surely you should be exploring someone who has the right skills and experience. There are no ideal candidate. There is just the person that you decide can do the job based on what you've seen. Don't compromise on your key criteria. If you've done your job description, you have these essential criteria that you're going to rely on for them to then go into their probation. Don't compromise on those. That's what they're there for, to help you show a lawful way of filtering. Be really clear on your non-negotiables. In terms of, do they need to be in the office 4 days a week? Is that absolutely non-negotiable? So make sure you understand during the recruitment process that you've told them exactly what the world is going to look like when they come and work for you.
Until they turn up on day one and go,
and go and need adjustment.
Yeah.
Don't cave under pressure. Don't be like, oh my goodness, we've got to get someone in and this person's available immediately. They kind of got half of what we need. Let's just go for it because the manager's really stressed out and can't wait any longer. You've got to take time to do it properly. So don't make rash decisions. I always say sleep on it at the very least. Document everything, and I will caveat that, and I'm sure Colin will back me up, but GDPR rules also apply to the whole recruitment process from the moment they've sent you their CV and you have their personal information, which also means they can put in a subject access request about any personal information you hold about them. So whilst you should accurately document the interview questions and process, please be mindful of written chatter about candidates and or new recruits when they join the firm.
You may not want your deliberation about the merits of a candidate to necessarily be by Teams or by Slack, and come back to these things never necessarily look good in the cold light of day, even if that wasn't what was intended.
Yes. The rest of the three are really for you guys to take away, because I appreciate I've taken up enough of your time now. And there are another couple of slides that just give you some key indications, sort of checklist when the Fair Working Agency come round to ask about your onboarding processes, and anyone who's working with ISOs or organisations like B Corp, the onboarding and recruitment process. Could you just just have a quick look. So they will be looking at these areas and making sure that you've done these. So just a couple of little handy slides for checklists. But that is the whistle-stop tour for this morning on recruitment and onboarding. We've run out of time for questions unless anyone has any pressing questions, or if you want to pop them in the chat, we can then maybe get back to you individually if you leave your contact details. If you want any more information about Kent HR brochures or Huntress, please go to the respective websites. Certainly for Kent HR, you can book a free 30-minute call with one of us as a consultant if you've got something you just want to sound us out about, to see if we can help you. But other than that, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been lovely to have you. Okay. Stephanie, did you want to say goodbye?
Yes, thank you very much for joining us today. I just want one thing, that statistic, 41%. I was absolutely horrified by that, because I think my statistic of a 12-week dropout is about 2%.
Wow.
So,
well,
that's so I was, so if you want to find out how we sort of like do our structured shortlist process and source candidates, I'd be happy to go into more detail if you want to reach out to me personally.
Fabulous. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.